Thank you. Thank you for staying to the bitter end, all of you. It's a pleasure to be here and present this young project, the radar. Thanks to IMI for funding it. And since we are young, we don't have data yet, so we'll talk about the background and the plan and what we are going to do. And maybe next meeting we will have some data. So what is it about functional decline in Alzheimer's disease, functional impairment, ADL, you know, the different terms. So as you all know, it's a key diagnostic criteria of Alzheimer's disease and in fact all dementias. And in addition to being a criteria, it's also the part of the disease which has real world, real life consequences. That's what people are worried about. One thing is to have impairment on a cognitive test, another thing is to be impaired in functioning in your daily life. So it's an important part of the disease phenotype. And also challenge for the patients, of course, challenge for the carers and also for the society because of need for support and care, etc., etc. So it's a crucial part of the problem. If you see it from a perspective of a pharmaceutical company trying to develop drugs for Alzheimer's disease, you have to focus on function because that's one of the criteria required in order to get an approved drug, cognition and functional effect. And possibly one of the explanations for, as Craig showed you, the very, really low success rate is the lack of sensitive outcome criteria, and that could be challenges in terms of assessing, measuring functional impairment and changes in that. I will come back to that. The traditional methods that we have for measuring ADL, I will show you, and you will probably know that, are insufficiently accurate and insufficiently sensitive and detailed. So it's different. One thing is to make an assessment of decline and impairment, but having a measure of function which is sensitive to change is a different story. So then there is an unmet need, many unmet needs. One of these is that in the ability to track and measure functional decline in Alzheimer's cohorts are needed in order to shorten the clinical development of new treatments, which will have an impact on the field. So that's the background for the radar AD project. And just to continue with a little bit of background. So how do we measure function in daily life? And in fact, this is the way we have done it as long as I've been in the field, which is quite long. And I'm sure Mercer is the same. That's how we did when we started, and that's still the way we do. So that's a little bit embarrassing. Everything else has changed, but we still assess our patients the same way. And how do we do that? Well, we ask carers how is this or that function doing, dressing or performing financial transactions, and we can try to fine-tune it, grade it a little bit. For example, dresses completely without supervision, dresses completely with supervision but without help, etc. It's still crude, and it's very difficult to then identify change on this. And then it depends on the memory, but potential bias of the carer who's waiting. So there's a lot of limitation with this way, but it's still the state of the art of doing ADL measurements. So there's a need for improvement, and wearables or other digital devices or biomarkers or remote monitoring technologies, different names for the same, have a lot of opportunities in this regard for many symptoms in Alzheimer's disease, but also for function. So because they are objective, they can be quantitative, easy to quantify. They can be repeated, even administered continuously. They are unobtrusive, no hassle for the patient. It's cost efficient. They can do things at home, or maybe not even need to do anything, just put a sensor on them. So it's a potentially very cost efficient way of collecting data. And in addition to the potential of devices, a lot of devices coming up actually as we speak. But we also had another development which is positive, but which is the ability to handle big data. We have artificial intelligence, machine learning, a lot of other sophisticated ways to manage big data, and these devices produce big data. So it's a complicated, there are lots of complicated issues around this, one of them being how to process and analyze the data. So these aspects are not trivial, but there are solutions which are available and which are also actually improving. It's a very active field of research. So what are we going to do in radar ID? So the main goal is then to develop and validate technology-enabled quantitative and sensitive measures of functional decline in people across the spectrum of Alzheimer's disease. So we will have healthy people, we will have people with subjective cognitive impairment, MCI, and even mild and moderate dementia included. So that is a particular challenge because obviously the functional impairments differ hugely in this group, and the focus is, I must say, on the earlier stages of the diseases. That's where we all agree that's where the most relevant group of people to explore. And if we do this, we can get better assessment of the disease, which lead to better and more cost-efficient clinical trials, and also has a immediate clinical relevance. So the aim is to identify technologies which can be used in trials, but also in clinical practice. So it's not entirely focused on clinical trials. So how do we do this? It's a complicated structure with 7 work packages, as you can see. We have project management, dissemination, of course. Where the key work packages are work package 2, 4, and 5. Work package 2 identifies the most relevant functional domains. Work package 4 is the technology platform. That's where the tech guys are putting their heads together. And then we have the most important part of the project, which is a clinical trial. We have a trial where we validate the selected device. So here we identify the relevant functional domains. Here we identify the best technology to measure that domain. And here we validate that measure. Because as you've seen on the conference, there's unlimited number of different devices out there, and we need to find a way of assessing them, whether they are really up to the levels that we need, or whether they are suboptimal and should not be used in practice, in clinical practice and trials. So this is how it works then. We have a participant with a device providing data to a radar base, which is receiving the data, quality checking it, processing it. We have analyzer software, and then we have modeling and assessment and prediction, and hopefully with an output which can be used for care staff or for the clinical researchers. This is the framework of the project. And here the partners who are contributing in joining in the radar project. The Amsterdam University has a key role, as has Oxford, Karolinska, and King's College, and then we have Alzheimer Europe doing a crucial role for PPI user involvement. We'll get back to that shortly. And then, as you know, IMI is a public-private partnership. We have several pharmaceutical companies who are interested in this, and we also are collaborating with some technology companies. So input of people with disease or carers is crucial, and we have a very ambitious partner or patient involvement platform, as we heard with the EPAD, and regarding domains, we are discussing with the patient which are the relevant and important functional domains from their point of view, and regarding devices, would people use the devices we select. Doesn't help to select a fantastic device if no one wants to use it, and what needs to be considered for remote monitoring in the real world. And regarding the clinical study, how can we discuss with the patients and carers, how can we make the study as minimally invasive or burdensome as possible, and what are the ethical concerns for users. So all these are discussed with participants and patients or representatives in a variety of ways. We have 2 main areas for the PPI involvement. One is a patient advisory board, which is organized by Alzheimer Europe. And Alzheimer Europe also helping us to develop 6 focus groups, which are led then in 3 different countries, with people with relevance and experience from being carers and even trying to recruit people with cognitive impairment. So that is clearly a crucial part of the whole project. We need to find devices which can be used and are feasible and relevant for the users. So how do we do this? So work package 2, as I said, it's identifying functional domains using a literature review, and then discussing these results with the patient advisory board. And we are ranking them in terms of relevance, highly relevant, based on whether they can predict MCI to dementia conversion, whether they are really impaired early in AD, whether they're predicting decline, and whether and they report from the patient advisory board. So that is the criteria for selecting domains. And here we have a long list of functional domains that we selected. And one of the most highly relevant is planning skills and memory. So that was identified as a highly relevant domain. So that's the first step then. And then the second step is then to then work with work package 4, the technology section, to identify a device which can measure this planning skills, memory, functional domain. And that ended up with a device from Altoida called augmented reality task, where the participant uses iPad to hide and find things and that's a kind of a reality test of memory in daily life, with some good. I'm not going into the details why that was selected versus others, but it is accuracy, feasibility, battery life, all these kind of various features which are important in order to get good and valid data. And then in the last step, then when we have the domain, we have the device, and then we are testing its validity in the clinic. And how do we do that? It's a clinical cross-sectional trial. People come to the centers to do clinical workup and diagnostic workup. They do the clinical rating scales, the good old-fashioned way. For ADL, we are using the Amsterdam instrumental ADL scale. So they do this, and then they get their device, and then they are using the device in the next 2 months with regular phone calls, and they come back to the clinic, give back the device, do another clinical rating, and that's it. And we plan to combine a variety of devices at the same time, and now currently discussing how that can be achieved in a feasible way. And another domain is then sleep. So we do the same things there: sleep quality, circadian rhythm. We have a Fitbit as the device for that, and again, patient coming to the clinic, getting the Fitbit, and then registering the activity data, and we can see how then the sleep data from the device compares with the Pittsburgh Sleep Questionnaire. So how is a high correlation between the device and the clinical assessment? And we suspect actually that the data from the device will be more accurate than the clinical instrument. That's the whole rationale for doing this. So that's how it works. So we have a variety of different devices that are being tested in the clinical trial. So we are not developing new devices. We are selecting, using a very systematic approach, the most relevant devices for the relevant domains, and then we are validating them in this trial. So the output will then be hopefully some good evidence for some good devices that can be used in clinical practice and in research. So the trial then involves 10 centers across Europe. We are aiming for a total population of 200 plus participants, controls, as I mentioned, preclinical MCI and mild to moderate dementia based on amyloid positivity. And the primary objective then, as you have heard, assess the performance of the device against standard ADL rating, and that's the primary objective. The secondary is then to evaluate the device versus other relevant scales, acceptability, and the technical performance of the device. So these are the key things that will be done. And as mentioned, it's a multi-center observational cross-sectional study for 8 weeks. That's what IMI wanted us to do. We would be interested in doing a longitudinal assessment as well, but that is not in the realistic for currently. But there's also a sub-study with a more sophisticated device. We have actually 2 more tires with more sophisticated devices. This is a tire 2 with home-based sensors, which has been done at 4 different centers. And then we have a final one, which is done at the center in Greece, which is a high-tech home where participants enter, live in the house, and then they are continuously monitored all kinds of ways. That's something we are now developing. It's not fully clear yet, but that's a more sophisticated way of monitoring them, the participants. And then finally, the timeline. We started at the kickoff early this year. We are currently in the phase of getting approvals, and we heard Mercer talk about the challenges of getting that, but we are making good progress and hoping to have approvals of the ethical committees and regulatory agencies by the end of the year, and hope to have the first patient in January 2020, and the last patient then end of 2021, and analysis the year after. So that is the plan. And then thank you all for listening. Here's all our partners here, the commercial ones, and some key supportive here, including Elisabetta from IMI, and I'm not sure whether Anna Diaz from Alzheimer Europe is here, but we have a lot of key people here. And I also want to mention Peter Jellevisser and Caspar de Boer at Amsterdam, who are leading the Work Package 5, the clinical trial, which is essential for the project. Thanks a lot for listening.